Caleb Rohr pressed his thumb against the cold steel of the drawer handle and pulled. The body inside wore a yellow dress and had been dead 3 days. Unidentified female, mid-20s, found behind a gas station off Route 9. No wallet, no phone, no one looking for her yet. He updated the log, noted the temperature reading, and slid the drawer shut with both hands. The fluorescent lights overhead made everything look clinical and pale. He preferred it that way. Clean lines, clear procedures, no ambiguity. He'd been doing this for 16 years. He inherited the job from his father, who'd done it for 30 before him. The Rohr family had been cutting open the dead in Bracken County since before the interstate went through. He moved to the next drawer. Male, 50s, cardiac arrest during a bar fight. Caleb had finished that one yesterday afternoon. The family would pick him up in the morning. 3 more drawers, 3 more bodies, all accounted for. He made notes in his phone, backed up the files to the county server, and checked the thermostats one more time. His coffee sat on the desk by the window, half empty and cold. He drank it anyway. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. He had paperwork to finish before he could leave, and his knees ached from standing all day. Getting old meant everything took longer and hurt more. The main phone rang. Caleb walked over and picked it up. Bracken County Morgue. It's Kepler. We're bringing something in. Detective Grant Kepler. Caleb had worked with him before. Kepler was thorough, humorless, and never called this late unless something had gone sideways. What kind of something? I'll explain when I get there. 10 minutes. The line went dead. Caleb set the phone down and stared at it. Kepler didn't do cryptic. He did direct, factual, and methodical. If he wouldn't say what he was bringing over the phone, that meant he didn't want it on record. Caleb refilled his coffee from the pot in the corner, added 2 sugars, and waited. The loading bay doors rattled when they knocked. Caleb unlocked them and pulled the left door open. Cold air rolled in from outside, along with Detective Kepler and Detective Nora Briggs. They stood on either side of a wheeled stretcher covered by a black tarp. The stretcher looked reinforced, heavier than standard issue. Kepler was in his 40s, graying at the temples, wearing a jacket that had seen better days. Briggs was younger, early 30s, sharp-eyed, intense. Neither of them looked like they wanted to be here. Evening, Caleb said. Kepler nodded. Briggs didn't acknowledge him at all. They wheeled the stretcher inside, and Caleb closed the door behind them. The sound echoed through the empty bay. What have you got? Caleb asked. Kepler exchanged a glance with Briggs. She gave him a small nod. We don't know, Kepler said. Found it in a field off County Road 14. Burned ground. No tracks, no signs of a struggle. Just this. He pulled back the tarp. Underneath was a reinforced body bag, military grade, sealed with heavy-duty zippers and metal clasps. Caleb had seen bags like this maybe twice in his career, both times for hazardous remains. What's hazardous about it? Caleb asked. Nothing, Briggs said. Her voice was flat. Chemically, we ran tests. It's just, look, you need to see it. Kepler's jaw tightened. This stays local jurisdiction. No state, no feds, no outside agencies. We're keeping this contained. Contained, Caleb repeated. Yes. Why? Because I'm asking you to. Caleb studied them both. Kepler looked exhausted. Briggs looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. Whatever was in that bag had rattled them badly enough to bring it here instead of calling the state medical examiner. If you want me to do an autopsy, Caleb said, double quotes, yes, on something you won't identify. Can't identify, Kepler corrected. We need you to tell us what it is. Briggs stepped forward. Under no circumstances can you disclose what you're about to see. Not to anyone. Not your staff. Not your friends. Not anyone. Do you understand? Caleb looked at her. I don't have staff and I don't have friends. Good, she said. Kepler moved the stretcher toward the main examination room. Caleb followed them through the double doors. The room smelled like disinfectant and cold metal. The autopsy table sat in the center under a surgical light. Caleb flipped the switch, and the light blazed to life. They lifted the body bag onto the table. It was heavier than Caleb expected. Kepler and Briggs both needed 2 hands to move it, and they worked carefully, like they were afraid of damaging something inside. Caleb pulled on latex gloves and approached the table. "You're both staying?" "No," Kepler said. "We'll be outside. Call if you need us." "What am I looking for?" Kepler hesitated. "Cause of death. Anything that tells us what this thing is, thing." Caleb said. Briggs met his eyes. "You'll see." We left through the double doors, and Caleb heard their footsteps fade down the hallway. The loading bay door opened and closed. Then silence. Caleb stood alone with the body bag. He reached for the zipper and stopped. His hands weren't shaking, but something in his chest felt tight. He'd opened hundreds of body bags. Thousands, maybe. This shouldn't feel different. He unzipped the bag. The smell hit him first. Not decay, not chemicals. Something else. Clean, almost sterile, with a faint metallic edge like ozone after a lightning strike. He pulled the bag open. The body inside was humanoid, or male presenting. Pale skin that looked luminous under the surgical light, almost translucent. The face was angular, sharp, beautiful in a way that didn't look quite real. The eyes were open, blue, frozen in a cold, empty stare. And the wings, 2 massive wings, folded tightly against the body, pressed down by reinforced straps. White feathers, layered and dense, each one perfect. The wings were real, not a costume, not a prosthetic. Real. Caleb stepped back from the table. His breath came shallow, his pulse hammered in his ears. He'd seen bodies burned beyond recognition. He'd seen bodies torn apart by machinery. He'd seen suicides and murders and accidents that defied logic. But he had never seen anything like this. The body didn't move. The chest didn't rise or fall. The skin had the waxy stillness of true death. Caleb forced himself to breathe slowly. He walked around the table, studying the body from every angle. No visible wounds on the chest or abdomen. No trauma to the head. The wings showed no signs of damage. He pulled his phone from his pocket and took photographs. Close-ups of the face, the hands, the wings. He measured the body. 6'4". The wings extended another 3 feet on either side when fully spread. Though he didn't dare release the straps yet, he returned to the head of the table and looked into those frozen blue eyes. "What the hell are you?" he said aloud. The body didn't answer. Caleb walked to his desk and turned on the digital recorder. He spoke the date, the time, and the case number Kepler had given him. Then he paused. "Unidentified remains," he said slowly. "Humanoid, approximately 6'4", male presenting, pale skin, blue eyes. Bilateral appendages resembling wings attached to the shoulder blades and upper back. Origin unknown." He stopped the recording. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "You document what you see, son. Not what you think. Not what you believe. What you see." Caleb had built his career on that principle. Facts, evidence, truth. He looked at the body on the table. He set out his instruments, scalpel, forceps, rib spreaders. Bones, everything clean and precise, arranged in the order he'd used them for years. His hands moved through the familiar routine, but his mind kept circling back to the same impossible thought. This body is human enough to study. He already knew it was a lie, but he picked up the scalpel anyway. Caleb stood over the body with the scalpel in his hand. The blade caught the light, and for a moment he couldn't move. Every autopsy started the same way. Y incision from shoulders to sternum, then down to the pubic bone. Open the chest cavity. Examine the organs. Document the findings. Simple, mechanical, routine. Nothing about this felt routine. He set the scalpel down and stepped back from the table. His father had taught him to trust his instincts. If something felt wrong, You stopped and reassessed. You didn't rush. You didn't force it, but his father had never cut open an angel. Caleb rubbed his face with both hands. The word had been sitting in his mind since he'd opened the body bag. And he'd been refusing to acknowledge it. Angel, as in wings and halos in biblical mythology. He'd gone to church as a kid, sat through sermons, learned the stories. He'd stopped believing in most of it after his wife died. Cancer didn't care about prayer. God didn't intervene. The world kept turning, different and cold, and now this. He walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, empty. Kepler and Briggs were gone. The streetlight flickered at the edge of the property. Everything looked normal. Caleb turned back to the table. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's find out what you are." Hay picked up the scalpel again and pressed the blade against the pale skin just below the collarbone. The skin resisted more than human tissue, tougher, denser. He applied more pressure and made the first cut. The temperature in the room dropped. Caleb paused. The thermostat on the wall read 68, same as always, but the air felt colder now, biting at his exposed skin. His breath didn't fog, but the sensation was unmistakable. He continued the incision, shoulder to sternum, straight and controlled. The skin parted cleanly, revealing muscle underneath. The muscle looked human enough, striated, dense, but when he examined it closer, he saw something else. Markings, thin lines, etched into the muscle tissue. Not scars, not wounds. Deliberate patterns that looked like writing or symbols, or both. They ran along the muscle fibers in precise rows, like someone had carved them there with surgical precision. Caleb leaned closer. The symbols glowed faintly, a soft white light, barely visible under the surgical lamp. He touched one with the tip of the scalpel. The light intensified for a split second, then faded. The feathers on the wings shivered. Caleb jerked back. The wings were still strapped down, still motionless, but he'd seen it. A faint ripple through the feathers, like something had passed through them. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. He took 3 photographs of the symbols, then resumed the incision down the center of the chest, careful and steady. The blade moved through tissue that shouldn't exist, revealing an anatomy that made no sense. He reached the end of the incision and set the scalpel aside. Then he picked up the rib, spreaders. This was the part his father had always hated. The sound of ribs cracking, the wet snap of cartilage giving way. It was necessary, but it never got easier. Caleb positioned the spreaders and began to open the chest cavity. The ribs resisted. He applied more force, leaning into it, and they finally gave way with a sound like breaking branches. The chest opened. Caleb looked inside. The heart sat in the center, black and collapsed. Not diseased, not decayed black. The tissue looked charred, as if something had burned it from the inside out. A puncture wound ran straight through the center, clean and precise. The edges of the wound were smooth, cauterized. Around the heart, pale white fluid pooled in the chest cavity. Not blood, not plasma, something else entirely. It had the consistency of oil, but reflected light. Like water, Caleb reached for a sample vial and froze. The room shifted, not physically. The walls didn't move. The lights didn't flicker. But something changed. Like the air itself had bent. And then Caleb wasn't in the morgue anymore. He stood on a battlefield. The ground beneath his feet was scorched black, cracked, and smoking. The sky above burned red and orange, churning with clouds that moved too fast. The air tasted like sulfur and ashdot in front of him. The angel stood alive. The same pale skin, the same sharp features, but the eyes blazed with light. The wings were spread wide, radiant, and enormous. The angel held the sword that burned with white fire, and blood ran down its arm from a dozen wounds. Across from it, a demon loomed, massive, 12 feet tall, maybe more. Black skin covered in ridges and scars. Eyes like molten gold, claws the size of knives. It wore armor made from bone and metal, and it smiled with a mouth full of teeth. Brune, Caleb heard himself say. The name appeared in his mind like it had always been there. The demon lunged. The angel raised its sword to block, but Varen was faster. One clawed hand caught the angel's wrist and twisted. The sword fell. The other hand drove forward, punching through the angel's chest with brutal efficiency. The angel's mouth opened in a silent scream. Light poured from the wound. Varen leaned in close, whispering something Caleb couldn't hear, and then ripped his hand free. The angel collapsed. The light faded. The wings folded inward. Varen looked up, straight at Caleb. The demon's eyes locked onto him and its smile widened. It knew Caleb was there. It could see him. The vision snapped off like a severed cable. Caleb staggered backward and slammed into the desk. His hand shook, his pulse hammered in his throat. The morgue looked the same. The body lay open on the table. The clock on the wall read 12:23 a.m. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to breathe. The vision had felt real, not a dream, not a hallucination. Real. He'd been there, standing on that battlefield, watching the angel die. And the demon had seen him. Caleb straightened slowly. His legs felt weak. He looked at the body on the table, at the blackened heart with its puncture wound, and everything clicked into place. This was how the angel had died. Varen had killed it. That battlefield, that moment, that wounded, had all happened. The lights flickered. Caleb looked up. The fluorescent tubes buzzed, dimmed, then brightened again. The sound changed, taking on a high-pitched tone that hadn't been there before, faint, but growing louder. He walked back to the table. The pale fluid around the heart had started to move, swirling in slow circles, despite nothing touching it. Caleb picked up the recorder and pressed the button. "Continuing examination," he said. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. Subject's heart shows signs of catastrophic trauma. Puncture wound through the center, approximately 3 inches in diameter. Tissue appears burned or cauterized. Cause of death likely exsanguination or cardiac arrest resulting from the wound. He paused. The high-pitched tone grew louder. Additional findings include unknown symbols carved into muscle tissue. Symbols appear to glow faintly under direct light. Purpose unknown. Further examination required. The lights flickered again. Caleb set the recorder down and looked at the angel's face. The blue eyes stared upward, unseeing. "Who are you?" Caleb asked quietly. The angel didn't answer, but somewhere in the back of Caleb's mind, he felt something stirring. A presence, watching, waiting. The high-pitched tone grew louder still. Caleb gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. "Proceeding with examination," he said, more to himself than to the recorder. His hand shook as he reached for the scalpel. Again, Caleb tried to focus on the work document, the organs, measure the puncture wound, take samples of the pale fluid. Basic procedures, simple steps, but the visions kept pulling him back. They came in flashes now, faster and more violent than before. Each time he touched the body, each time he made a new incision, he was thrown back onto that battlefield. He saw the angel fighting. He saw Varen circling, calculating, waiting for an opening. He saw the moment the angel's guard dropped just for a second. Can't Varen struck. The visions were getting longer. Caleb examined the lungs. They looked normal at first glance, but when he made an incision to check for damage, the vision slammed into him again. The battlefield stretched for miles. Smoke rose from 1,000 fires. Bodies lay scattered across the scorched ground. Demons, angels, creatures Caleb didn't have names for. The angel stood alone, surrounded. Its sword blazed with light, but the light was dimming. The wings were torn and bloodied. Varen emerged from the smoke. "You fought well," the demon said. Its voice rumbled like an earthquake. "But you are alone, and we are legion." The angel raised its sword. I don't need an army to kill you. Varen laughed. No, you just need competence. The demon attacked. The angel parried, but barely. The strikes came faster, harder, each one driving the angel back a step. Varen was toying with it, playing, enjoying the slow destruction. Caleb tried to look away, but he couldn't. The vision held him locked in place. The angel's movements grew slower. Blood ran from a dozen wounds. The sword wavered. Varen feinted left, then drove his clawed hand forward with brutal precision, straight through the chest. The angel gasped, and the sword fell from its hand. Varen leaned in close. You die alone, unmourned, forgotten. The demon ripped its hand free, and the angel collapsed. But this time, the vision didn't end. Varen turned its head slowly, scanning the battlefield. Then it looked directly at Caleb. There you are, it said. Caleb's breath caught. Varen took a step toward him. The ground shook with each footfall. I can feel you watching, creeping through this memory like a rat in the walls. Caleb tried to move. He couldn't. His body refused to respond. The demon stopped 5 feet away. Its molten gold eyes burned into him. You opened the body. You cut into the flesh. You disturbed the seals. I don't, Caleb started. The symbols carved into its muscle. Varen interrupted. Binding marks meant to keep the memory of its death contained. But you've been careless, little human, and now I can see you. The demon smiled slowly, deliberately. And soon I'll be able to touch you. The vision shattered. Caleb slammed back into his body and fell against the autopsy table. His hands gripped the cold metal, and he sucked in air like he'd been drowning. The morgue lights flickered. The high-pitched tone was louder now, almost painful. He looked at the body. The angel's face remained frozen, expressionless, but something had changed. The air in the room felt heavier, denser, like a storm building just out of sight. Caleb backed away from the table. His pulse hammered. His hands shook. This isn't real, he said aloud. It's stress, lack of sleep, something in the air. Caleb grabbed his phone and called Kepler. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then voicemail. Kepler, it's Roar. I need you back here now. Something's wrong with the lights went out. Complete darkness. The emergency backup should have kicked in immediately, but it didn't. Caleb stood frozen, listening to his own breathing. The high-pitched tone grew louder, then from somewhere across the room. Okay, he heard a sound, wet, heavy, like something dragging across the floor. Who's there? Caleb called out. Silence, then a voice, deep and rumbling. You know who I am, right? The backup lights flickered on, dim, red, emergency mode. Varen stood at the far end of the room, 12 feet tall, black skin, molten gold eyes. The demon's armor gleamed dully in the red light, and its claws scraped against the tile floor. It looked exactly as it had in the vision, solid and real and utterly impossible. Caleb's legs went weak. He gripped the desk to keep from falling. Varen took a step forward. The floor trembled. Surprised. Caleb couldn't speak. The demon gestured toward the autopsy table. You've been very thorough, cutting, documenting, desecrating what little remained of this failure. It's just an autopsy, Caleb managed. No. Varen's smile widened. It's an invitation. The angel died on the battlefield. Its body should have dissolved, returned to the essence, but the binding marks kept it intact, kept the memory of its death trapped inside the flesh. And when you cut through those marks, you broke the seal. Caleb's mind raced. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Humans never do. You stumbled through existence, blind and ignorant, breaking things you can't see. Varen moved closer, each step deliberate. The angel's death created a wound between worlds, And you just made it bigger. Why are you here? Varen stopped 10 feet away. Because I can be. The wound is wide enough now. Your world, your fragile little realities, so easy to step into, so easy to break. The demon raised one clawed hand. The air around it distorted, shimmering like heat rising from pavement. Caleb looked around frantically. The door was 20 feet away. He'd never make it. The demon was too fast, too big. There was nowhere to run. Varen watched him calculate. Go ahead, try. Caleb didn't move. The demon laughed. Smart for a human. The high-pitched tone grew unbearable. Caleb pressed his hands over his ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside his skull, vibrating through his bones. Varen took another step forward. I should thank you. You've given me access to this world. Fresh meat, fresh blood, fresh suffering. Aka. The demon's eyes burned brighter. I'll start with you, of course. A courtesy. Caleb's back hit the wall. Nowhere left to go. Varen raised its claw, and the air around it crackled with energy. Then the entire room exploded with light. White, blinding, searingly bright. Caleb threw his arm over his eyes, and the high-pitched tone became a roar. The floor shook. The walls groaned when he lowered his arm. Someone else stood between him and the demon. Tall, broader than Varen, wearing armor that looked like polished silver fused with light itself. Massive wings spread wide, each feather sharp as a blade. In one hand, a sword that burned with white fire. Varen snarled. No, the newcomer didn't speak. He moved. One moment, he stood still. The next, he was in front of Varen, sword swinging in a massive arc. The demon barely blocked in time. Claws meeting blade with a sound like thunder. Caleb stumbled sideways and collapsed behind the desk. He watched, frozen, as the two titans fought. The archangel struck with precision and overwhelming force. Every swing of his sword left trails of light in the air. Every step shook the room. Varen fought back viciously, all claws and teeth and brutal strength. Bet he was being driven backward. The morgue disintegrated around them. Equipment flew across the room. The autopsy table flipped over. The walls cracked. Varen roared and lunged, aiming for the archangel's throat. The archangel caught the demon's wrist mid-strike, twisted, and drove his sword upward through Varen's chest. The demon screamed a sound that made Caleb's ears ring and his vision blur. The archangel twisted the blade and pulled it free. Varen staggered backward, black blood pouring from the wound. The demon's eyes blazed with fury and something else. Fear. This isn't over, Varen snarled. The archangel raised his sword. Light erupted from the blade, pure and devastating. It consumed Varen entirely, burning through flesh and bone and armor until nothing remained. But smoke and ash dot, then silence. The archangel lowered his sword. The light dimmed. He stood in the center of the ruined morgue, wings folded, utterly still. Caleb pulled himself upright, leaning heavily against the desk. His ears rang, his hands shook. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The archangel turned to face him. His eyes were silver, bright, and cold. He looked at Caleb for a long moment, and Caleb felt the weight of that gaze like a physical force. Then, without speaking aloud, the archangel's voice filled Caleb's mind. Stay where you are. Caleb stayed frozen behind the desk. His legs wouldn't have supported him anyway. The archangel walked through the wreckage with calm, measured steps. Glass crunched under his feet. Sparks fell from exposed wiring overhead. He moved like the destruction around him was irrelevant. He stopped at the overturned autopsy table. The angel's body had been thrown across the room during the fight. It lay crumpled against the far wall, wings bent at wrong angles. Chest still open from the autopsy. The archangel knelt beside it, one hand resting on the dead angel's shoulder. Caleb found his voice. Who are you? The archangel didn't turn. His voice echoed in Caleb's mind again, clear and deliberate. Michael. The name hit Caleb like a punch. Not a name, the name. Archangel Michael, commander of heaven's armies. The warrior, the judge. You're real, Caleb said. It sounded stupid the moment it left his mouth. I have always been real. You simply lacked the context to understand what that meant. Michael examined the body, his expression unreadable. His fingers traced the incisions Caleb had made, pausing at the symbols carved into the muscle tissue. You cut through the binding marks. I didn't know what they were. That is evident. Michael's tone carried no anger, just cold assessment. But intent is irrelevant. The marks were broken. The memory was released. Viren found the opening and used it. Caleb pushed himself upright, using the desk for support. The demon said the angel's death created a wound between worlds. Yes, when this one fell, Michael gestured to the body. His death was meant to be contained. The binding marks kept the memory sealed, kept the wound from widening. But you exposed them, and then you broke them. I'm sorry. Michael stood, turning to face Caleb fully. His silver eyes were impossible to look at directly, but Caleb forced himself not to look away. Your apology is unnecessary. You acted within the limits of your knowledge. Ignorance is not a crime. Then why are you here? Because Varun crossed into your world physically. That gave me permission to follow. Michael walked toward Caleb, each step deliberate. We are bound by rules, human. We cannot simply enter your world at will. There must be cause. There must be breach. Varun provided both. Caleb's pulse hammered. Michael stopped 6 feet away, towering over him. Even without the armor and wings, he would have been imposing. With them, he was overwhelming. What happens now? Caleb asked. Now, I take this one home. Michael gestured toward the dead angel. And I remove the evidence of what occurred here. Remove how? Varen's presence left a mark on this place. I will cleanse it. The building will be repaired. The damage will be undone. And the witnesses will forget. Caleb's throat tightened. Witnesses, the detectives who brought the body. The civilians who saw the field where he fell. Anyone who has knowledge of his existence. Michael tilted his head slightly. Including you. The words hung in the air between them. Caleb forced himself to breathe. You're going to make me forget. I am offering you a choice. A choice. You may keep the memory of tonight, or I will remove it. And you will wake tomorrow believing you processed routine remains. No trauma, no fear, no burden. Michael's expression didn't change, but his voice softened slightly. Most would choose to forget. Caleb looked around the ruined morgue equipment, destroyed. Walls cracked, his blood on the floor from where he'd been thrown against the desk. And in the corner, the body of something impossible. What about the detectives? He asked. Their memories will be removed regardless of your choice. They do not have the capacity to carry this truth. And civilians, the same. The field will be explained as a chemical fire. The body will never have existed. Your world will return to its comfortable illusion. Caleb rubbed his face with both hands. His head throbbed. His ribs ached. Everything hurt. Why give me the choice? Michael was quiet for a moment. Then, because you saw clearly. When confronted with the impossible, you did not run. You did not break. You sought to understand. He paused. That is rare in your kind. What happens if I remember? You will carry the knowledge of tonight for the rest of your life. You will know the truth of what exists beyond your world, and you will be alone in that knowledge. Michael's eyes seemed to pierce through Caleb. It is not a gift. It is a burden. Caleb thought of his father, the man who taught him to seek truth, to never look away, to document what he saw, no matter how difficult. His father had cut open bodies for 30 years, carrying the weight of every death, every tragedy, every unanswered question. The truth matters, his father had said, even when it hurts. especially when it hurts. I want to remember, Caleb said. Michael studied him. You are certain. Yes, you understand you cannot share this knowledge. If you speak of it, you'll be dismissed as delusional, institutionalized. Perhaps your life will become more difficult. I understand. Michael nodded slowly. Then you will remember. The archangel turned and walked back to the dead angel's body. He lifted it with both hands, cradling it like it weighed nothing. The wings folded inward, and the body began to glow with soft white light. What was his name? Caleb asked. Michael looked at him. Seratiel. He was young. He fought bravely, and he died because he underestimated his enemy. I'm sorry I cut him open. He is beyond caring, but your documentation of the binding marks helped confirm what I suspected. Michael's expression softened, just barely. You served him well in your way. The body dissolved into light, fading until nothing remained but a gentle glow in Michael's hands. Then that too disappeared. Michael spread his wings. They filled the room, massive and terrible and beautiful. He looked at Caleb one last time. You will sleep soon. When you wake, the morgue will be repaired. The detectives will return confused but unharmed. You will answer their questions truthfully within the limits of what they can accept. He paused. And you will live with what you now know. Will I see you again? Caleb asked. I do not know. But if you do, it will mean something terrible has happened. Michael's form blazed with light, and then he was gone. No sound, no explosion, just absence. Caleb stood alone in the ruined morgue. The emergency lights flickered. The floor was covered in debris. His hands shook. He walked slowly to where the autopsy table had been. Glass crunched under his feet. He knelt and picked up a single white feather that had fallen from Seratiel's wings. It was real, solid proof. He held it carefully, turning it over in his hands. Then exhaustion hit him like a wave, and everything went black. Caleb woke on the floor of his office. Sunlight streamed through the window. He pushed himself upright, groaning as every muscle in his body protested. His ribs ached. His head throbbed. His hands were covered in small cuts. He stood slowly and looked around. The morgue was intact, not repaired. Intact, like the fight had never happened. The autopsy table stood in its usual position, clean and empty. The equipment sat on the shelves, organized and undamaged. The walls showed no cracks. The floor held no blood. Caleb walked into the examination room. His footsteps echoed. Everything looked exactly as it had before Kepler and Briggs arrived. The surgical light hung overhead, switched off. The instruments sat in their drawer, unused, but his body remembered the cuts on his hands, the bruises forming along his ribs, the exhaustion that made his legs shake. He checked his phone. 7:43 a.m. 8 missed calls from Kepler. 3 voicemails. Caleb listened to the first one. Roar. It's Kepler. We need to talk. Call me back as soon as you get this. The second roar. This is getting urgent. We don't know what happened last night. There's a gap in our memory, and just call me. The third. We're coming back to the morgue. Be there. Caleb deleted the messages and pocketed his phone. He walked to his desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside, wrapped in a clean cloth, was the white feather. He'd put it there before he passed out, or maybe after. Time had gotten blurry toward the end. The feather proved it had been real. He wrapped it carefully and returned it to the drawer. 20 minutes later, Kepler and Briggs arrived. They walked in looking tired and confused. Kepler's jacket was wrinkled. Briggs had dark circles under her eyes. Roar, Kepler said. We need to talk. Caleb nodded. Come in. They sat in his office. Kepler rubbed his temples. Briggs stared at the floor. We're missing time, Kepler said. Last night, we brought you something. Remains evidence. We can't remember exactly, but when we left here, it was around midnight. A cue, and then we woke up in our car at 6 a.m., parked outside the station. No memory of anything between. What do you remember before midnight? Caleb asked. Kepler frowned. We found something in a field. County Road 14. Burned ground. We thought it was important, but now I can't remember what it was. Briggs looked up. Did we bring you anything? Do you have any records? Caleb shook his head. You came by around midnight. We talked for a few minutes. You said you'd found something in a field, but wanted to run more tests before bringing it to me. Then you left. It was a lie. A clean, simple lie. And they believed it because they had nothing else to believe. Sure? Kepler pressed. I'm sure. I was doing paperwork most of the night. You stopped by, we talked, you left. That's it. Briggs stood and walked to the window. Something's wrong. I know something's wrong. I can feel it. Kepler looked at Caleb. You didn't see anything unusual. Nothing out of the ordinary. Caleb held his gaze. No, just a quiet night. They left 30 minutes later, still confused, but accepting. They had no evidence of anything else. Their memories were gone, and Caleb's story was consistent. He watched them drive away, then returned to his desk and sat heavily. The next 3 weeks passed slowly. Caleb repaired his body. The cuts healed, the bruises faded, the exhaustion lifted. He returned to work, processing the dead, documenting the causes, maintaining order in a world that no longer made sense. He told no one what had happened. Kepler and Briggs stopped asking questions. After the first week, the burned field on County Road 14 was explained as a chemical spill from an illegal dump site. The case was closed. Life moved on. But Caleb remembered everything. He remembered Sarah Teal's face. He remembered Varen's voice. He remembered Michael's silver eyes and the weight of his presence. He remembered the impossible fight, the blinding light, the truth that his world was thinner than he'd ever imagined. He carried it alone. Some nights, he'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced he heard the high-pitched tone again. Other nights, he'd stand in the examination room, staring at the autopsy table, wondering if any of it had been real. Then he'd open the desk drawer and look at the feather. And he'd know. A month after the incident, a young woman came in to identify her father's heart attack, sudden and unexpected. She cried in Caleb's office while he filled out the paperwork. He made her coffee and let her sit in silence until she was ready to leave. As she walked out, she turned back. Do you believe in heaven? Caleb looked at her. A kid, maybe 25, grieving, lost, asking him for comfort he couldn't provide. Yes, he said. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Good, that helps. After she left, Caleb stood alone in the empty morgue. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Everything looked normal, but he knew better now. He walked to the examination room and placed both hands on the autopsy table. The metal was cold and familiar. He'd spent 16 years working here, cutting open the dead, searching for answers. And in one night, everything he thought he understood had been turned inside out. Michael had called it a burden. He was right. Caleb would carry this knowledge for the rest of his life. He would wake up every morning knowing angels were real, demons were real. The thin wall between worlds could be broken by a scalpel and a dead body, and no one would ever believe him if he tried to explain. He thought of his father again, the man who taught him to document the truth, no matter how difficult, to never look away, to stand in the presence of death and bear witness. His father would have chosen the same. Caleb turned off the lights and locked the morgue. He walked to his car in the empty parking lot. The street light flickered at the edge of the property. The night was quiet. He drove home slowly, watching the dark fields pass by his windows. Somewhere out there, Sarah Teal had died. Somewhere beyond that, Michael stood guard against things Caleb would never fully understand. And here, in this small town, in this quiet morgue, Caleb Rohr would continue his work, cutting open the dead, documenting the truth, carrying a burden no one else could see. He parked in his driveway and sat in the dark car for a long moment. Then he went inside, made coffee, and sat at his kitchen table with a notebook and pen. He wrote down everything he remembered, every detail, every word, every moment, because that's what his father would have done. The truth matters, even when no one else will ever know it. Especially then. 3 months later, Caleb stood in the morgue during his night shift. The routine had returned. Bodies came in. He processed them. He documented causes of death. He maintained order, but sometimes late at night, when the building was empty, he'd open the desk drawer and look at the white feather. And he'd remember not with fear, not with regret, with clarity. He lived with the truth because someone had to, and he remembered every detail. The world remained fragile. The walls between realities stayed thin, and somewhere above or beyond or beneath, forces moved that humanity would never comprehend. But Caleb Rohr had stood in the presence of angels and demons. He had seen the impossible, and he had chosen to remember. That choice had cost him his peace, his certainty, his comfortable ignorance, but it had given him something else, purpose. He closed the drawer and returned to work. The dead were waiting, and Caleb had stories to tell them, even if no one else would ever hear.